spinning wheel. Awesome. And I think we're live here, you guys. Yes, we are. Excellent. Everything's working, I think. So hello to everybody on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. Welcome to this awesome discussion. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. I'm here with our Chief Movement Engineer at 7 Movements, Mr. John Sinclair, and our new Chief Science Officer, Lydia Roos from Evolvewell Research. And Lydia, I'm so happy to have you finally on one of our lives. And before we get started, I was hoping, rather than me do your introduction, for you to talk a little bit about yourself, Evolvewell Research, and sort of why we've partnered up with you here at 7 Movements.
Yeah, so I am a health psychologist by training. So what that means is I was trained as a researcher to really dive into studying how the mind and the body are connected and how physical health improves mental health, but also how things like mental health and behaviors can improve physical health. And I created Evolvewell Research Partners a couple of years ago to help companies to really be able to conduct their research. So what I was seeing was a lot of companies wanted to be able to carry out their research. They didn't really have the internal resources, and outsourcing to big, like pharma-focused contract research organizations is just unwieldy. So, and way too expensive. So I thought I could do that. So I created Evolvewell Research Partners, and I met Dan, and we had been talking about 7 Movements and my previous research, my scientific ideas. We talked about the science of 7 Movements for a long time before we really even discussed formally working together. But I've been so interested and so invested in the success of 7 Movements ever since you first told me about it. And I mean, I'm a scientist at heart. I am skeptical of things. I'm a critical thinker. And with 7 Movements, like, we dug in deep, and I was like, yes, I am sold on this. So I've been very excited to work with you. And when we started talking about actually working together and leading the science behind 7 Movements, I jumped in, and it was a no-brainer. So I'm excited to work with you all and also be leading collaborations and scientific partnerships moving forward.
Well, I can speak for both John and myself in saying that we're super excited to have you aboard, and I feel like this has been a long time coming. So I'm just really excited to have someone help us on the science and what we're trying to do. We've had our partners at University of British Columbia McMaster here now for, I think, since 2020, right, John? And it's really awesome to have someone on the team now who can speak science along with Johnny. So I'm really excited to have you join us, Lydia.
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard this story, but I want everyone else to also know, why did you start 7 Movements? What was the thought behind it? What was your goal? I think that was the first thing that made 7 Movements stand out to me.
Awesome. Yeah. No, why don't, Johnny, I'll go through the origin story, and then you fill in any gaps for me, okay? But
sure.
So, 7 Movements have been a passion project for John and myself for the last 10 years of our lives. So we started out personal trainers. We were working together in Edmonton, and I came to John with a problem. And that problem really was that, hey, man, we're involved in fitness, and it seems like all the programming that we're doing in fitness is for the people who are already moving. And I pointed to him at my grandmother is a great example. And she was a gardener, and at the time she was kind of going through some struggles physically, and it wasn't allowing her to get out in the garden very much. And I said, John, like, all fitness programming I'm learning here is absolutely fantastic for people who are into fitness. I'm never getting Baba to do this stuff. It's not going to happen. Is there a way we could program exercise that would be like an invitation for her to be like, hey, like I'll give that a try. And we wanted to do two things. We wanted to connect exercise with the people love doing. So this, in this case, gardening. And we wanted to make it super accessible, inclusive, so anybody could do this. So this is like my, 7-year-old grandma at the time who had a bad back and all the things. And she just wanted to feel when she went out and did an activity that she loved. So that's when John and I got together, and we came up with this concept of microdosing movement. We're like, just get her moving a little bit at a time. And John was the mastermind exercise programmer that I knew. And I was like, well, what could this look like? And he's like, well, let's get her like moving a minute at a time. Let's do it. Like, let's create 7 movements for her. And that's kind of just how the company came to be. There was no like, oh, it needs to be 7 movements or 7-minute this or that. It was just literally, I think 7's a good number. Let's get her moving a little bit at a time. We'll create these 7 sort of unique strategies for her, and just get her feeling better in the garden. So actually, in 2013, we wrote our first book. It was called 7 Movements to Keep You Gardening for Life. And it was just like a little microdosing program someone could do that would make them feel better before they go in the garden and after they got out of the garden. And it was just really simple things. Anyone could do it. Sort of fast forward through the last 10 years, we began programming for I guess I'd call them special populations, but really, like, we're focused on what we call the non-moving population. So how do we get people who aren't moving? 7 movements is designed to be an invitation into the space of exercise for people. And for us, on the programming side, we really focused on a few communities. One was people with chronic disease who have actual limitations to, say, participation in, say, traditional fitness type stuff. Active agers or seniors, again, some limitations sometimes exist from participation in those traditional fitness. But even without limitations, some people just don't like traditional fitness stuff, and that's totally fine. We just want to get people moving intentionally with purpose. And so we've got active agers, chronic disease, and occupational specific programming. So mastermind behind all of that as we sort of built this out. And then in 2018 or 2019, we ended up speaking to the Canadian College of Physicians and sort of presented this idea of prescribing exercise to them. And they actually, a lot of people there loved what we were talking about, but they said it'll be really hard to prescribe until you have some research behind it. And that's what sort of started my research journey, because I had no idea how to do research, really what research was in like a really professional sense. So I sought out partnerships with Professor Jonathan Little at UC British Columbia. He was working on something called exercise snacking. So we formed partnerships with him and Martin Gabal. What's his last name, John? Marty
Gabal.
Yeah. At McMaster University. And that was our first sort of research partnership. And since then, we've been focused on, we've run some research studies around cancer prevention. We're now involved in a type 2 diabetes research project with them, with an obesity research project, all looking at how we can use this really interesting microdosing movement intervention that's super accessible, gets that non-moving population moving. How does it impact folks with these different conditions? And it's been really exciting. And that's why I'm super excited that you're here with us to help guide us through some of this research. I'm excited for all the people watching us on LinkedIn and Instagram, YouTube right now. We want to partner with you guys. We want to work with people. We're a collaborative company. We want to figure out ways that our programming can help different populations. And that's kind of where we are today. We have an amazing platform we built. We have a commercial platform launching here in May, but we also built a research platform specifically to run our research projects on. And it was informed by all of the amazing team at UBC and McMaster as we built out that first project. So now we can deliver a really cool intervention. And now we just need amazing researchers to work with to utilize that and figure out how we can get more people moving. So John, did I miss anything on that? I rambled for quite a while there. Did I fill in any gaps that I missed there for you?
No, you did excellent, bud. I think the one thing that we really kind of settled on, well, two things that we really settled on, and that was that in order to prepare people for the type of exercise or to invite them in, it's really important that we find something that is purposeful and things that they love. So Dan talked about the things that they love, and then we build the movement strategies around what tasks might they do in those things that they love doing. So in gardening, we broke down, well, what are all the things they need to do while gardening? What are the movements that need to occur in gardening, and how do we prepare them and then help them recover from it? So the exercise programs that we build are all driven around how do I give you movements that match your purpose and then make it autonomous enough for you to build a behavior around it, and then start building a streak so that it becomes not just what you do, it becomes part of your life and part of this is how I function. And so the movements are really task-based, functional, purpose-driven movements that are organized in such a way that make you feel a whole lot better than you did when you started. And we've built it all out around the idea of starting from where you are today, which is how much stress can I tolerate and what am I ready to handle? And then the program is prescribed to you based on what you can handle in that moment. So if you're feeling kind of run down and you have low energy, the exercises that we're going to deliver to you, or the platform that we'll deliver to you, will be things that energize you, not things that steal from your energy, right? And so that was some of the main purposes, was everything we do is really truly about preparation, right? And so if people love to do things, I can take somebody who's a truck driver and prepare them for the tasks needed for truck driving, just like we do for a hockey player or for a nurse or for a baseball player. It's the same principles. We just look at the purpose of the movement, and then how do we find those tasks and break them down into the movements to make them more resilient to be able to tolerate the stresses in their life and in their work.
I hear so much of that actually connects to tons of scientific concepts that I don't even know if you realized that you were putting into the product when you made it, or if it was just like so intuitive to you when you did it that, this is like a whole new, for one, this is a whole new way of thinking about functional exercise. Like functional movement is like, it's not functional in that like you have to push a tire across a room. It's really personalized and tailored to that person's goals. And that is motivational in itself, that it's personalized and that people feel that like increases this like feeling of being bought into the process. And it's like making sure that it is aligned with something that they're interested in is a big factor in behavioral science. So making sure that someone becomes kind of emotionally invested in doing this. And I think that comes out in how people actually end up like interfacing with the program. And maybe Dan, you can talk about how that's actually been shown up in the studies. So like talk about the adherence rate and how people have actually experienced the program.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing that came out of our cancer prevention study that we ran was that it was 80 participants, I believe, and they were all what we classify as non-movers, sedentary folks, and we had a 92.5% adherence rate to the program. So it got non-movers participating in a new exercise behavior, right?
That's amazing. That is unheard of.
Yeah, we had no idea. We just thought I was pretty good. And
so you're lucky if you get like 80% usually of participants actually adhering to a protocol. We're like shooting for 80%. So the fact that you were able to get 95% and you weren't even trying that hard, and that just speaks to how effective the program is, and that it's like really easy for participants to do. It's not this like whole, this huge commitment that feels really burdensome. It's only it's like a few minutes a day.
Yeah, in that particular study, they were required to move 4 times a day for about a minute. So it was really exciting to see the behavior piece, and it just goes to show that like this idea of microdosing movement is incredibly accessible to this population. And as I said, like we stood this company up as an idea of inviting more people into this space and being like, hey, you can be an exerciser too. It doesn't have to look like 45 minutes to an hour, because that's just what we've traditionally programmed this type of thing in the past. And I know John has some thoughts on why we've done that in the past. But this is a way to get you moving that is going to impact your life in a positive way. And then as from a research standpoint, it's really nice to know that your participants can all really participate in the intervention that you've built with them. And then we can see how that intervention impacts the outcome that you might be looking for from a research standpoint. So John, I don't know if you have anything to add to what I just said, but yeah, like let's do that, and then let's dive into some of the research stuff that we've been up to.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think the one thing that you mentioned about functional fitness, Lydia, is that at the core of its definition is purpose, right? And so if you can find activities and movements that really connect with people, and do it in a dosage that they can tolerate, right? Because most fitness interventions, these people can't tolerate that amount of stress. The dose is way too high. It's way too intense. It's too long. It's too complex. That's why they don't go do it. And it frustrates me that the fitness industry hasn't tuned into this, right? Is because it's really only serving maybe about 20% of the North American population. The other thing is that time is a massive commodity for people, right? And so we don't really have big chunks of time to do high intensity doses of activity. A, if I don't like it, B, if I don't find it purposeful, and C, if I don't have the time to do it, I'm not going to do it. And so I think we really kind of put our thumb on an opportunity to look at the way that we dose exercise in a way that will start to develop habits for people. And as Dan puts it, just invite them into the world of exercise. When I would present to personal trainers all around the world on programming, I would say to them, you do realize that everybody in this room is a complete freak, right? Like all you trainers are freaks. Nobody in the world behaves and thinks like us, right? So it would be silly.
We are the outliers.
100%, right? It would be silly for us to expect our clients and our patients to think like us and behave like us. It doesn't work, but that's what we do. Who creates all this stuff? Trainers and personal trainers and educators and stuff. And they put all these doses into unrealistic expectations that they're going to create change. And we've found that with research, right? Like researchers are interested in seeing change in physiological or metabolic changes from exercise physiology. And the reality is that you're not going to be able to get the same kind of outcomes from doing smaller doses in massive changes, but the aggregate of it over time is laddering it up to the point where they now go, you know what, I think I now feel confident in my movement ability and confident enough in my capacity to maybe go try an exercise class, right? And so we're not here to replace what the fitness industry does. We're here to serve the people that don't go to the fitness industry and give them the capacity to eventually be able to evolve into that.
I think something that you're touching on is also something that has been missing in a big way from the fitness industry. And that is not, you're talking about like the physical aspect of it, and in being able to like have the capacity, like the physical capacity to do these movements, compared to like going and running for a half an hour and then lifting heavy weights for a half an hour, something like that, where people just aren't at that stage yet. And so that's a part of it. But the other part of it that you're talking about is the psychological component of, people don't a lot of times have the knowledge that they can really do that, or they just don't have that confidence built up yet. And they don't, their assumption is not like, oh yeah, I can do that and I can figure it out. Their assumption is that's hard. Like, I don't know if I even want to do it. I don't know what that's going to feel like. And that creates this like resistance and an additional barrier to doing exercise. But what you're providing, it's almost like a resilience training. And so it's providing people with these like smaller experiences of exercise that leads them to this like increased self-efficacy for really being able to increase their amount of exercise. And I think we haven't tested this yet, and I'm really eager to. So if any researchers out there want to look at this, please be our guests. But one thing that I think would be really interesting to look at is the downstream effects on other habits as well. So the downstream effects on exercising more, getting into other, fitness classes, or starting to do more intense work. But also, like, once people realize I can change my habits, and it doesn't have to be these huge, overhauls. I can change a little bit at a time. I can add in a little bit more vegetables in my diet. I can get a little bit more sleep every night, and seeing those effects happen in kind of a cumulative and like long-term way. Like, that's what the real aim is to affect people's health in the long term, not just like change something for the duration of the study while you're hounding participants to make sure that they're doing this thing, and then they stop doing it once the research is over. So I think it just has so much potential in that way too, and I'm excited to explore it.
Me too.
So, Lydia, tell us, like, when you look at what we're doing through a research lens, what are some of the positives that you see being able to work with like a 7 Movements and what we have to offer to sort of the research community out there?
Yeah, so I think first, when we started chatting, I had this revelation of the fact that there were probably interventions out there that would work with researchers and partner, and researchers don't necessarily have to create their own interventions all the time. And that, to me, that alone was like mind-blowing. And I wish that I had known that while I was still in academia or carrying out my own research, that was even a possibility. And so I think like just that alone was exciting. But then when we dug into 7 Movements specifically, and you've been talking about how it's a very customizable program and platform. So you can work with pretty much any population. You can alter the way that things are coming through, and like that, even down to like the items that people are being shown, but also the specific programs. So the movements that people are being told to do, like everything is customizable, and that it's accessible, that it's doesn't take that much out of participants' day. So it isn't easy intervention. Most interventions are not easy for participants to do, and they take a lot of effort and time. And most of the people that we want to help the most are the people who have the least amount of time and the least amount of resources. And so being able to do something that even someone who is, a single mother working 2 jobs, doesn't have access to a gym nearby, even being able to reach that person and say, it's okay, because we only need 7 minutes from you throughout the whole day. So that making it so accessible is exciting. And the adherence rate, I would be remiss if I didn't say that alone is a really, really great thing, because that is something that as a researcher, we're constantly worried about. Because if people are not doing the intervention, then you can't test whether the intervention is effective. And then the last thing is just how, because it's so flexible, you can test it with people. You can look at mental health, impacts on mental health. You can look at it in a cancer population. You can look at it in the amount of different kinds of populations and diagnoses and conditions that you can look at with this is, I haven't found an end to it yet. So I think that's really exciting. And I know that you're also excited for, expanding that out too. So yeah. I would actually love to hear, what are your, what would be, a kind of study or a population that you would love to get this out to?
Yeah, John, why don't you take that one on?
Yeah, so we've currently looked at cardiorespiratory changes as a risk mitigator for cancer. So, future studies on looking at even different strategies for improving cardiorespiratory exercise. We can slice that razor a million times just in the programming, but also we're looking at diabetes, and then we just recently got a grant for obesity, as Dan was saying. But we really want to do some more research with some rare diseases. So Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis. We were talking with you the other day about the effects of microdosing can have on depression. We all know how good exercise is for the brain, but I don't know if it's ever been measured in this facet. And so, and then I think what we want to do is work with more mental health practitioners. So the more ammunition that we can gain from the research side of things to make them feel confident that there are some strategies that they can help prescribe to their patients is going to be really important. So working with mental health challenges is going to be a massive one for us. Of course, all the different metabolic syndromes we're such a simple fit for that, but we're even just looking at eventually getting to the point where we're looking at the effects of microdosing on performance, right? So whether it's cognition, all the different levels of and parts of brain health that we could start looking at, where it's cognition, attentional focus, memory, those types of things. It just goes on and on and on. And I think what I love about what our platform has delivered is that we can actually, the laboratory now becomes the living room becomes your laboratory, right? So that they don't have to be pulled into the lab to be testing this. They can test the effect of the exercise dose, and we're gathering all that data in the back end of our platform to help inform not only just exercise adherence, but we do surveys along the way too. We know that enjoyability and the likability of a particular movement to get somebody to want to get up and move is really important. So we're gathering all that data, and that just allows us to frame future research or to make our programming that much more efficient, or just be a little bit different in this program so we can gain some new insights. So yeah, like you said, it truly is infinite where we can go and who we can help serve.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on what you were saying in terms of making the living room the laboratory, I love the way that you said that, by the way. It's so much nicer sounding than like just remote studies. But I will say that EvolveWell Research Partners, we also do specialize in remote research. So if there are any researchers out there who are thinking about a partnership, but you don't have much experience doing things remotely or having a decentralized study, you know, we can help facilitate that. So we can do, I mean, we can do almost anything remotely. We can even do like the mobility assessments and physical function assessments remotely. We can look at biomarkers. We can even do blood biomarkers remotely. So, you know, don't like think that, oh, this is a remote thing. And so, you know, then I won't be able to get the one biomarker that I really care about, because you may still be able to do that. But another thing that you said that I just latch onto again is how impactful this can be in such a variety of conditions. And I think like such a big part of that is the physical aspect as well as the psychological aspect. And so I think about, you know, people who have depression. This is something that we talked about a few days ago, that people who have depression, it's hard for them to be motivated to do much. That's literally part of the diagnosis. And yet we know that exercise is potentially even more effective than taking an antidepressant. And exercise has far fewer side effects than taking an antidepressant. So being able to get someone moving, like that initial getting someone moving is the hardest part. Once they're moving, people tend to feel, you know, better and good enough that maybe they'll continue moving. And then that's when we can really see the impact of exercise. And at the same time, like we know exercise has such a big impact on so many areas of health that it is like most researchers agree, most scientists agree that if you're going to do one thing for your health, exercise is the biggest one. There might be a little bit of competition with sleep there, but they're not mutually exclusive. So I would say like sleep and exercise are the two biggest things that you can do for your health. And so the fact that like you're making it accessible to people who, aren't normally able to or feel like they can access it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And sorry, John, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, that's okay. I was just going to say, and just to double back on what Lydia said with sleep and exercise, they're a perfect marriage, aren't they? Right? So exercise will help you sleep, and sleeping more will help you exercise more. So like they're a perfect marriage, and they have to go together if you want to improve your health and performance for sure.
Awesome. Actually, you took the words out of my mouth, John, so thank you for that.
Sorry.
The other thing I wanted you to touch on a little, John, was, you know, the way you look at customizing programming for the populations that we've worked with so far, and the ability to customize that programming for other populations. I'd love you to take us through the lens of the exercise programmer and how you look at that, whether you're dealing with someone with chronic pain or multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, obesity. How do you look at it through the programming lens from a microdosing point of view?
So from a programming is really just taking all the sciences and organizing them together to get a particular outcome. That's the way I kind of look at programming. But behind that is obviously having a really good understanding of what's happening neuromechanically, what's happening metabolically, And then what are all the particular analytics we look at in movement and in the tasks that people need to do throughout the day. So if we're talking occupational specific, we would look at, well, what are the tasks needed for that particular activity? Are they sedentary for long periods of time? If so, are they in a seated position? How are they sedentary? Because being sedentary in a seated position is different than being sedentary in a standing position. And so those positions relative to gravity influence our anatomy. And then so the trick I always use is this trick this wonderful gentleman explained to me one time, who was a medical doctor and pharmacist. And he said, he was one of the most brilliant minds I've ever talked to. And he said, well, really the concept is all about counter strain, isn't it? I said, well, that's really interesting. He goes, because if you're strained in this position, it doesn't mean that it's bad until you need to do something that takes you this way, right? Because the body's going to lay down collagen to fortify this position, because this is where I spend all my time. Now, the problem happens is when you need to stand up and extend and rotate, and you can't do that, right? So the reality is looking at strain and counter strain. What is the activities or the disorder or the disease that is straining the body and the brain? And then how do I counter strain it in the opposite, right? So it's what movements and tasks are they needing to do, and then what are their capabilities? How do I organize that in such a small dose? Well, we start with the movement first, because I mean, that's our company. We start with movement first, and then we look at, okay, well, how do these movements influence their capacity and their tolerance for stress? And from there, we craft this experience so that we're not trying to change the world overnight, but we do know that if I ask you to get up from a seated position every 45 minutes, or you set your clock to it, we like using little tricks, Lydia, where you'd have like a dice on your desk, right? And every time you get up, you get to turn that dice one more mark. So it's a constant visual reminder that, oh, I got to get up and I need to drive my arms back this way so I can create some extension in my spine, right? To counter strain. So we start putting all these little layers together so that in the aggregate of all these little things that we're doing, we're actually creating change long term. And so that's the way I look at it. And with a disease, we'd look at, well, what is the metabolic strain to that particular disease? Is it neurological? Is it metabolic? What is the strain that's going on there? And what is it the physiology is not healthy doing? What is the neurological system doing to try and mitigate that? And or is it working too hard? Or is it just not turning on enough? Or is there a delay? Like in the case of Parkinson's, I think of Parkinson's as it's a delay in messaging and communication. So how do I change that communication or create interference within that communication so that the brain has to respond to a different stimulus? And so then we create different movement strategies that might either augment or intercept a particular message without people knowing that that's going on. And so we have lots of little tricks of the trades of how to get the vestibular system involved. So we got a top-down effect of what's going on from the vestibular system through the neurological system that way. We've got things where we stomp our feet and create a different mechanoreceptor response to disrupt the communication going up the chain. So there's lots of little tricks that we put in there, and then we put it into a nice little recipe. You know, you can't make a cake without really good baking soda. So you have to have the right ingredients to get the outcome that you're looking for. And then we just craft it into that 7-minute or 7 dose or possibly single doses that people can autonomously choose how many that they do throughout the day to build the streak to make them feel better. And the other part to it is we're looking at creating little toolkits for people as well based on their disorder. So with Parkinson's, we did a focus group, a bunch of different surveys with a bunch of different groups to determine what were some of their challenges they were having throughout the day. And that's what we want to do with foundations, is ask them, what is it that the people that are suffering from really challenged with, and how can we create strategies that help them aid in the function of their day-to-day activities or the things that they love doing, right? And one of the things that was most impactful was, Dan, when we did that focus group, and we asked them what the Parkinson's group, that was so beautiful. They came to us from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and they said, you know, one of the things we'd love to do is be able to handwritten note. And we asked them, well, how many people would like to write in their own handwriting. Everyone's hand went up. I said, well, let's just try something right now. So I did a little sensory stimulation drill where we'd like clap our hands, we'd body clap the arms, we'd pinch the skin, we did a vestibular check, and then we had them go back and write. And 100% of the people said that they wrote faster, they wrote with better legibility, and they recognized their own handwriting, and that created an emotional response. Some people were crying there, right? And so that let us know that, oh, okay, that's a strategy that is highly effective. That's supporting our hypothesis on what we could do for people. So let's just build out a toolkit, and we're just going to offer that toolkit on our platform and let people try it, and then let us know, did it work? Did it help you? If it did, great. That's something you're going to keep using, right? And so those are the things that we're really interested in doing. And what I'm interested in doing as a geeky exercise programmer is, how do I get movement to heal you? Knowing all these little things that we can do. I don't think we give our bodies credit enough for the way that how circulation works, how it improves and helps you, all the communication and input that the body is taking in. That's all valuable information. When we can make that people make sense of all that information in a simple way, then it gives them strategies to get on with their day, right? And to live their lives to its utmost potential.
That's amazing, John. How long are the programs typically? Like, I would love to know, how many movements do you typically prescribe in a day, in a week, and how many weeks, at least so far, have you done in research studies?
Good one. So in the studies themselves, I think they've been 12 weeks. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah.
I think going forward, some of the studies may be longer. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think the intervention will be longer for future studies.
And the prescriptions, we have in the ones that we've done so far, and well, we haven't changed it yet, but we've had a control group where the control group is a mobility group primarily, and the other group is an exercise, whether strength or cardio. And so that's what we've done to look at that. And then the number of exercises, they range, oh, Dan, what are they, like up to 12 to 20 in each group, something around there. So at least they've got like some variety, so they don't get bored.
Total, but per day they were looking in our first study were 4 doses a day, I believe, to keep their streak alive. They had to hit 4 doses a day, and but I think the researchers were encouraging them to do a few more. But I think to hit the standard was 4 a day. What we do on our commercial platform, we get them to do 7 a day because we're 7 movements and we want them to do 7 a day to keep their streak alive anyways. But the whole idea of the platform from our perspective, maybe a little different in research because you need more standardized, but from our perspective on the platform side for our customers is that we want them to have full autonomy. You do 1 a day, do 7 a day, do 15 a day. What makes you feel better, and find the times where you can actually fit them in. And then we have tools within our platform that help them do that, whether it be like little push notifications or encouragements and that kind of stuff. But from a research standpoint, so far we've done 4 doses to keep their streak alive. And I think so far we stayed consistent with that. I think it probably depend on what the researchers are trying to get out of it and what they want to test.
Yeah.
And so most of what we talked about so far has been really focused on the conditions. Excuse me. Have you done in the past, or do you have plans to also do things for certain areas that might be super tight or have pain? Like, for example, someone has back pain and they want to use 7 movements. They may not have enough time to actually go to a physical therapist and get physical therapy once, twice a week. But is there some kind of program that someone with low back pain might benefit from, or someone with knee pain, for example? Is that something in the past or have plans to do?
Yeah, we have a host of programs, all driven around, we called them our complaints section, right? And so the complaints were like pretty much like osteo joint pains. So whether it was low back pain, knee pain, we did an arm, elbow, and wrist pain, neck pain. Those were the big ones, I think. Am I missing any, Dan?
No, I mean, I think to answer your question, Lydia, we have programs already built for all kinds of complaints like that in all kinds of settings, I would say, like from an office setting to, living room to in the gym, like all kinds of different settings and environments. But what would be really interesting from a research standpoint would be to look at some of the impact of those programs on chronic pain or someone with significant back pain. We have a feeling we know what the outcome will be because our users tell us what's making them feel better, but it'd be really interesting to go through the research process to do that for sure.
Just out of curiosity, what are they telling you?
Well, I mean, John said it all with that Parkinson's focus group was really interesting. Is there's a certain magic when people experience movement the way it's supposed to be experienced, sort of for the first time in a long time, that they think. Sometimes John gets described as a bit of a magician because all of a sudden they're like, how did 2 minutes go by and I feel better? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. But it's just because they're going through movement from somebody who understands how they should be moving, and they're experiencing it for, like I say, the first time probably in a long time, particularly if someone who's been in pain, because they'll just avoid movement because they associate movement with pain, and then they get to do it. So we get a lot of shocked faces and a lot of shocked responses from people who experience our platform for the first time when they're in pain. Because they just don't think a minute of movement could actually make any sort of difference in how they feel. But then they experience it, and then they're just totally bought in, right? They're just like, hey, give me more of this stuff, and they become probably our most consistent users because they understand that it makes them feel better, and so that's exciting. Like, that's why we built this whole thing, was to make people better.
And John, I'm sure a lot of people who've already been following 7 Movements are familiar, but for anyone who is new to this, tell us how you became this magician that you are. How do you know, like, what are the right movements for these kinds of things?
Lots of education and lots of practice. I failed a lot and figured out some tricks, but I've also had some brilliant mentors. Like, I've been fortunate enough to travel the world educating, and when you become an educator, you also get to see other presenters and learn what they're doing. And so it wasn't like I was blessed with this magical ability to help people. It was a lot of years, and I've been at this for 25 years now. And, my background was I wouldn't say my background. Part of my degree was in athletic therapy, and that's what kind of drove me into the world of rehabilitation and physical therapy and stuff. But, I got right out the gate. My very first job was working alongside the head of the Canadian Physical Therapy Association. So I learned a lot working at a physical therapy clinic, and then working in sports, and then I made the shift to strength and conditioning, and then so I had a lot of experience in medical exercise and doing more certifications and traveling the world. And so really a lot of it was just an amalgamation of things that I saw. And then I guess I'm good at connecting the dots and kind of siphoning away the stuff that doesn't really matter and focusing on the things that do. And I think I have an intuitive sense to movement. Ever since I was really little, that's all I ever wanted to do was be involved in sport and movement. And so I think like that's how I see the world, is through movement. And so I see things the way people are moving that I can adjust like this, and then that makes sense to them, and the world of biomechanics and exercise just makes sense to me. It's nothing really all that special. It's just how I see the world. And so when we come up with these strategies, it's not just, oh, John Sinclair came up with this. This is, me talking with lots of different practitioners and really honing in on what are the anchor points or the key things we need to look at to help somebody feel better. And really it comes down, number one is circulation. If I improve circulation, you pretty much move better at wherever you apply that circulation, right? So that's, it usually starts with that. And then it's all about just improving confidence in somebody's ability to move in a range of motion that doesn't bring upon apprehension and fear. I can tell a little story. I remember having this one client in Edmonton where she had at one time dislocated her knee doing a lateral lunge, right? And so what do you think is the no exercise you give that person is a lunge, right? Not necessarily because the lunge is bad for them or that the lunge is a bad exercise, but they're scared to death of that movement, right? Because who would ever want to go through something like that? So I remember blanking out one time and prescribing the lunge. It's like, okay, we're going to do this lunge now. And she's like, no, remember, John, I can't do lunges. I was like, oh, you're right. How about we just play catch? And so I just toss a medicine ball to her and she'd catch. And then I strategically got terrible at tossing and I tossed it a little bit outside her and she would step and catch and throw it back. And, by definition, a lunge is a step in return. And the next thing you know, she's lunging. I'm like, hey, what do you think of that exercise? And she's like, good. I was like, does it feel a bit like a lunge? She's like, yeah. And she's like, what? Wait a minute, right? And so we essentially just tricked her brain to have to focus on something other than her knee when she's doing a lunge, right? And so that's the fun part about this, is getting people to realize that movement isn't their enemy. It's actually, it really helps them. And sometimes we have our belief systems that limit our abilities and or capacities around movement. And so that's the fun part for me, is helping them see that movement can be an essential part of their day that actually brings upon a lot of not just health but joy.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, you two, I feel like there's going to have to be a part 2 to this because there's a lot more that I'd love to cover here, but let's wrap this one up. But Lydia, I'd like you to tell the audience out there, how to get in touch with us, to start discussing what collaborations could look like, what partnerships could look like, how we could get some research started, some pilots started, all that kind of stuff. So just give the people an idea of how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can look me up on LinkedIn. My name is not very common, so you should be able to find me. Or you can email me, lydia@evolvewellresearch.com. And lastly, I just want to add, because you did just mention this, Dan, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-blown RCT that we work on. So we can do a pilot study to, have a proof of concept and allow you to use that for grant applications so that we can do a larger, bigger study. But please do get in touch, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of this.
Amazing. Yeah. And same goes for me, Dan@7movements.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn. We can get you in touch with Lydia, or we'll just start figuring out what the partnership discussions look like. But we're ready. We're ready to work with all of you. We want to work with all kinds of different populations. We want you to bring your ideas to us, and let's solve the inactivity crisis together. So thank you, Lydia, for joining us. Thank you, Johnny, for jumping on, and all of your brilliant insights from both of you have been amazing. And like I say, we'll probably have to have a part 2 to this. So that's it for us. Signing out.